Here Come the Carnivores. When my father came home from prison, he gave away each of his guns. His shotgun and .30-06, the World War II Beretta my grandfather had given him. And then he drove to the end of someone's dirt road and let his retrievers loose. He loved those dogs, maybe more than he loved me. So when I found their kennels empty, I knew something was really wrong. Still, for months we tried to live like we lived before he went to prison. My father coming down to breakfast like always, his beard ruffled by sleep into craggy peaks, his flannels rolled to the elbow to reveal his beefy forearms. But he didn't fight with my mother over the paper anymore. He didn't tease her about her cooking, and he didn't follow her around the room anymore with his eyes. Even before the accident, I'd been unsure how they fit together. My mother who sipped Chardonnay and listened to smooth jazz. My father who practiced his turkey calls in the backyard. But this was different. He just stopped trying. And so I wasn't surprised when he came home one day with a sheaf of papers under his arm and asked my mother to join him in the den. This is where things get good, my friend Allison told me. We were lying on loungers at the community pool, one last hurrah before my parents sold her house and I wasn't allowed back in. Allison fingered the row of silver bangles at her wrist. For the last 3 years, she'd made a sport of pitting her parents against one another. Mom 1, Dad 0, she said. But the corners of her mouth told me she didn't mean it. Though the divorce was quick and no one cried, I got the feeling that neither of them wanted to see it end. Not even my father, who'd started the whole thing. Our house sold within a week, and after my parents split the profits, my mother bought a condo and a second-hand BMW with a roof she refused to open, as if taking that small pleasure would suck the air from the cushion of her sadness, and she'd be left with only the hard edges of her anger. My father surprised us both. I think we expected him to buy some land, move east to the woods and build himself something simple and sturdy, a log cabin with a smokehouse out back. But instead, he bought a trailer at an auction and hauled it to a lot in a rundown trailer park, the last space before the park ceded to cotton field. It could have been sad, I guess, a man living alone, ex-con, recently divorced. But for some reason, it wasn't. The trailer, with its retractable wheels and walls paneled in fake wood, suited him better than the house he'd shared with my mother and me. It was a place in between, a thing astraddle, one leg on each side of a center line. I was 20, taking classes by day and splitting my time between the condo and the trailer at night. I should have gotten my own place, retreated to neutral ground the way my friend Allison had done. She was living in an upstairs efficiency that overlooked a man-made duck pond. You'd think it was nice, sitting on the balcony watching those birds dunking themselves in the still green water. But all they ever did was scream at each other and waddle up the stairs to shit on Allison's doormat. I realize now I was making excuses not to leave. The free rent, the use of my mother's old Honda. But the reason I stayed had as much to do with my parents as with me. I was afraid, I think, that if I left, the only remaining link between them would be broken, and they'd wander off like the duck Allison had found dazed on the side of the road, its wing crumpled and bloody, limp at its side. So I stayed. At my mother's, I had my own bathroom. We had a fridge that crushed ice and an alarm system that beeped every time you opened the front door. When we ate dinner, always out, My mother didn't stop talking, as if she was afraid of that looming silence, a dense fog we navigated with the sounds of our voices. At my father's, things were simpler. On the concrete slab out front, he positioned 2 folding chairs before the fire pit he'd welded himself from an old barrel. If, at dusk, you sat with him there, you could see for miles, past the vast field of cotton, past the angled roofs of the country club, all the way to the western lip of the sky, where the sun was edging the horizon, looking like a coin tossed into the fire. We didn't talk. We just watched the sun sink and listened to the coyotes call to the park's scrap-fed mutts. I tried not to love the place. I tried to see it for what it was, cheap and temporary. But like so much else, I only saw it through his eyes. My mother couldn't understand. "It's nice," I told her. "He's fixing it up." "Nice?" she said, with a little ice in her voice, "is a jacuzzi tub and a walk-in closet." "You know that's not him," I said. I could no more imagine my father sitting in a jacuzzi as I could him riding a white stallion, a feather in his hat. "Has he found a job yet?" she wanted to know. My mother had lost weight since the divorce, and I could see the nubs of her shoulders beneath her silk blouse. "He's looking," I lied. In truth, he spent most of his days tinkering with his truck or sitting under his carport drinking beer. "He needs to see someone," she said slowly, making a circle of her thumb and forefinger, as if to focus my attention there. But I was thinking instead of the way he got up in the morning dark and walked across the old Caliche Road to the cotton field, how he'd stand between the rows in his boxer shorts, scratching his hair-swirled belly with one hand, a cup of coffee steaming in the other. I'd asked him once what he was doing out there so early. "Breathing," was all he'd said, and I'd started to understand what he liked so much about all that space, the rows unspooling for miles. In the kitchen, my mother was waiting for me to say something. "He's not depressed," I said, "if that's what you're thinking." "You'll see," she said, and smiled at me in the way that meant our conversation was over, that I was wrong, but she wasn't going to say it. "No, you'll see," I said, and I meant to go on convincing her, but she'd already turned away, her back hard and sloped as a shallow bowl. This was before my father started disappearing in the evenings a little at a time. His truck gone from the drive, his phone ringing and ringing without answer. When I stayed with him, he didn't bother to make excuses. He just slipped out the front door in a clean shirt, and hours later, when he finally returned, his cheeks would be pink, his shirt hanging loosely from his neck. I assumed it was another woman, and I wondered how he could have met someone so soon. Whoever it was, my father was keeping her away on purpose. Maybe she was young, I thought. Maybe she was married. I wanted to ask, but thought better. If he lied and said there was no one, I'd have to pretend to believe him. And if I did that, something would shift between us. And one day soon after, we'd look down to discover we were standing on opposite sides of a fault, a crevice between us, too wide to cross. Before my father went to prison, he wouldn't eat any meat he hadn't killed himself. We had a commercial-grade freezer in the garage stocked full of vacuum-sealed packages the dates inscribed on each with permanent marker. When he returned from a hunt, the three of us, my mother and father and I, would spend an entire day packaging the meat and grinding the rest into the pulp we'd stuff into sausage casings and then cure in the electric smoker. Those nights, my mother would stand at the sink, sighing as she waited for it to fill with soapy water so she could mop the dribbled blood from the floor. I suppose she hated it. The mess, the smell afterward for days like the inside of a cave, the mineral sourness of it. Although I complained, I secretly liked the smell. I suppose I even liked the process, the mirrored blade, the milky swirl of tissue, the cold blast from the freezer. It didn't bother me then, all that wildness reduced to a stack of sterile packages. When I finally went to bed, long past midnight, I could hear my father's dogs whining on the back porch, their nails clicking as they paced their cages. Then we lived in a neighborhood with houses on either side, but my father liked to pretend we were out there alone, living somewhere in the cradle of the woods. He built up the fence and planted the trees in our backyard so thick you could hardly see from the back door to the gate. But no matter how hard he pretended he wasn't living smack dab in the middle of suburbia, when people smelled the meat smoking, the doorbell started ringing. Arthritis-bent old ladies and doughy new moms, retired army colonels and 12-year-old boys on their bicycles, all of them salivating on our doorstep. "Ah," my father would say, filling his lungs, "here come the carnivores." He'd made a good living this way, guiding week-long hunts, teaching gun safety classes, butchering the kills of amateur weekend hunters. But my mother was the one with the 401k, the one who paid the mortgage and made sure I didn't miss a dentist appointment. She wore pantsuits to work and ruffled collars and had her nails done every 2 weeks. No matter the occasion, her hair was always hairsprayed into a helmet of tight curls. Hanging in the hallway, though, was proof they hadn't always been so different. A snapshot I'd found and framed for their 20th anniversary. In it, my mother's hair is a nest of dark tangles. She's sitting on my father's lap, smiling, a beer in her hand. And I'd had to look closely to discover she isn't wearing a bra under her t-shirt. My father's beard is dark and nearly down to his chest. He's sunburned, and he's just brought the beer to his lips, his neck stretched to reveal the sharp stone of his Adam's apple. When my mother unwrapped the frame, she had to look twice at the picture. She crinkled her brow and brought the picture to her nose. Seconds passed. Finally, she smiled in recognition and blushed and thanked me, but I knew what had happened. I knew in those first few moments she hadn't recognized herself.